The Threxian alliance was dying. For thousands of years, their empire had stood as a beacon of peace among the stars. Their cities shone with towers of crystal and steel. Their fleets patrolled the trade lanes, protecting allies and strangers alike. Their scholars studied the mysteries of the universe, and their artists sang songs that traveled from one world to another. To many, the Threxians were proof that civilization could rise above war and blood, but all of that was being torn apart. The enemy came from the black edges of the galaxy. They were called the Kothar Swarm. No one knew where they were born. No one knew if they even had a purpose. They had no words, no leaders, no mercy. They were endless ships filled with endless beasts, driven only by hunger. They did not conquer planets. They consumed them. Forests, oceans, cities, people. Everything was stripped away until only dust and silence remained. World after world fell. Velar, commander of the Threxian defense fleet, had watched it happen too many times. He had seen cities burning, skies full of falling ships, children crying as the swarm descended. Every time he swore to himself he would not let another world fall. And every time the swarm proved stronger. Now the alliance itself was collapsing. Entire fleets had been lost. Half of their member worlds were gone. The proud Threxian High Council, once filled with voices of confidence, now spoke only with fear, and so in desperation, they made a choice that broke their pride. They sent a call for help. The signal was broadcast in every known tongue, carried across hyperspace to the farthest corners of the galaxy. It was not a demand. It was not even a bargain. It was a plea. To any who hear this, the message said, "We beg for aid. The swarm consumes us. Our fleets are broken. Our people are dying. We ask for soldiers, for defenders, for protectors. Whoever you are, please help us." Velar had been the one to record those words. His voice still echoed in his own mind, and every time he remembered it, shame stabbed his heart. His people were not beggars. They had been strong once. Yet the truth was bitter. If no one answered, the Threxians would not live long enough to regret their pride. Days passed. Then weeks. Signals returned, but not the kind they hoped for. The great empires of the core ignored them. The wealthy merchant guilds refused to risk their fleets. A few smaller allies sent words of sympathy, but no soldiers. Even the warrior clans of the Drasai, once proud rivals of the Threxians, sent only silence. It seemed the galaxy had already buried them. Then one day, a signal came. Velar sat in the command chamber of his flagship when the communication officer cried out, "Commander." A reply, "Unknown source, fringe sector." Valar's heart leapt. He turned to the screen. A voice, rough and low, spoke in the Alliance's trade language. "We received your call. You ask for soldiers. We will come." The words were plain. No promise of fleets, no grand titles, no demand for reward. Just that. Velar frowned. "Identify the source." The officer hesitated, then answered, "Origin, planet Earth." Velar blinked. He had heard the name only in whispers, in the cautious reports of explorers, a small isolated world on the edge of the spiral arm. Dangerous, they had said. Unstable. Its surface was full of storms, its lands full of predators, its people restless and strange. Most called it a death world, a place where only the strongest survived. Velar had never met a human. He wasn't even sure they were truly spacefaring. Yet here they were, answering a call that far greater powers had ignored. His second-in-command, Ilarin, hissed in disbelief. "Humans, Deathworlders? Commander, we cannot trust them. They are primitive, reckless. They will bring chaos, not salvation." Velar stayed silent for a long moment. His eyes remained fixed on the stars beyond the viewport, where the shadows of the swarm always seemed to linger. Finally, he whispered, "Chaos is better than silence. Let them come," and so the signal was confirmed. Coordinates were exchanged. The Threxians waited. Weeks later, on the edge of a broken system, Valar's fleet stood battered and weary. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the dark emptiness beyond. His officers whispered doubts. Perhaps the humans would not come after all. Perhaps they had lied. Then, without warning, hyperspace tore open. A ship emerged. It was not sleek like a Threxian cruiser. It was not elegant like the vessels of the high empires. It was ugly, scarred with black plating, patched in places with steel that looked as if it had been welded in haste. Its very shape spoke of function, not beauty, like a blade made only for cutting. Valar's breath caught. This was no polished savior. This was something raw. The ship's voice came through the comms, steady and sharp. "This is the Earth Transport Vanguard. We come in answer to your call." Valar's officers stared at him. Some looked fearful, some looked angry, but Valar only nodded slowly as if a truth long hidden had just revealed itself. "They called for help," he murmured, "and Deathworlders came instead. The swarm came sooner than expected." Valar stood on the bridge of his flagship, eyes locked on the black of space. Warnings filled the air. Distant sensors screamed of movement. Thousands of ships, dark shapes cutting through the void like a tide of knives. The Kothar were here. Fear spread through the Threxian fleet. Valar felt it ripple across his officers, their voices rising, hands shaking as they reported numbers too vast to count. Even his own hearts pounded hard in his chest. The swarm was larger than anything they could face. He knew it. Everyone knew it, and yet the humans did not flinch. Their single ship, Vanguard, moved forward, engines glowing like fire. Valar could see them on the comm screen. Calm faces, steady eyes, voices sharp with commands. They acted not like soldiers marching to death, but like hunters who had found their prey. The swarm ships poured into the system, blotting out the stars. Great claws of living metal unfolded, their hulls bristling with weapons. The Threxian fleet opened fire, bolts of blue energy flashing across the void. But for every swarm ship destroyed, 10 more appeared. Valar gripped the railing tight. "Hold the line," he ordered, though even he heard the tremble in his voice. Then the humans struck. Their ship darted through the chaos, moving with reckless speed. Where Threxian pilots flew with precision and caution, the humans seemed to dance with danger. They cut close to enemy fire, twisted through swarms of ships, and fired weapons with merciless rhythm. Their guns did not stop, pouring metal and flame into the darkness. Valar's officers gasped. "They'll be torn apart," one cried, but they weren't. The Vanguard moved like it belonged in the storm. Every risk they took opened a path. Every reckless dive broke a cluster of swarm ships. They were not avoiding danger. They were using it, pulling the enemy into traps only they could survive. And then the ground battle began. The swarm unleashed their beasts, creatures bred only for killing. Great hulking forms fell through the skies, crashing onto the surface of the Alliance colony below. Their claws tore through stone. Their screeches made the air shake. The Threxian soldiers braced themselves, but Valar saw the fear in their eyes. The humans were already there. Small squads dropped from orbit in dark pods that slammed into the soil. Hatches blew open and the Deathworlders charged out. They did not wait for orders. They did not hide behind walls. They met the beasts head-on. Valar watched the feed from the ground. He saw a squad of humans standing firm as a beast 3 times their size rushed them. Its claws could split steel. Its roar shook the mountains. The humans fired without fear, aiming for its eyes, its joints, its heart. When the creature reached them, one human leapt forward, driving a blade deep into its throat. The beast collapsed and the squad kept moving, covered in blood but unbroken. Another squad ran out of ammunition. Valar expected them to fall back, but they did not. They drew blades, axes, even their bare fists. They fought with brutal fury, striking until the swarm creatures stopped moving. Some fell, but those who lived fought harder, as if the death of their comrades only fed their rage. Valar's throat went dry. He whispered, "They are not soldiers. They are something else." Hours passed. The battlefield became a storm of fire and blood. The Threxian lines wavered again and again, but whenever they broke, humans filled the gap. Whenever the beast pushed forward, humans pushed back harder. For the first time in his life, Valar saw the swarm hesitate. By nightfall, the ground was black with ash and corpses. The swarm began to retreat. Their endless advance slowed. The humans did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They buried their dead in silence, faces grim, hands steady, and then, without rest, they prepared for the next battle. Valar stood among the wounded, staring at the humans. His people wept over their losses. The humans mourned too, but in a different way. Their grief did not weaken them. It hardened them. He approached the human captain. Her armor was cracked, her face smeared with ash, but her eyes were calm. "You fought like demons," Valar said quietly. "How do you not break? How do you not run when death surrounds you?" The captain looked at him, her scarred face lit by the glow of burning wreckage. "We were born into death. On our world, everything tried to kill us. The storms, the beasts, even each other. We learned one truth: if you run, you die. If you fight, you might live. So we fight, always. Villar had no answer. His people had built a civilization of peace, a life without struggle. The humans had built themselves in struggle. They were the children of a death world, and now they had brought that fury into the stars. As the smoke of battle rose, Villar finally understood why the galaxy whispered about Earth in fear. The battlefield was silent. The fires of war still burned in the distance, but the thunder of weapons was gone. Smoke curled into the sky, mixing with the gray clouds of a dying sun. Villar walked among the ruins of the colony world, his boots crunching against shattered stone. Around him lay the remains of the swarm. Broken shells, twisted limbs, their black blood soaking into the soil. The stench of death was everywhere. For a long time, Villar did not speak. He only listened to the sounds of his people mourning. Threxian soldiers sat among the wreckage, eyes hollow. Some wept for friends who would never return. Others stared at nothing, their spirits broken. The humans were different. They had lost many as well. Villar could see their bodies lined neatly, covered with dark cloth. Yet the survivors did not sit in despair. They moved quietly, repairing weapons, patching armor, tending to the wounded. Their grief was there, heavy in their eyes, but it did not crush them. It sharpened them. Villar approached the human captain. She stood over the bodies of her fallen, her scarred face lit by the glow of a burning transport. Her eyes were steady, but her jaw was tight, as if holding back the weight of sorrow. "You do not stop," Villar said softly. "Even now you prepare for another fight." The captain looked at him. "If we stop, then their deaths mean nothing. We bury our dead, we carry their memory, and then we fight again. That is how it must be." Villar felt shame press against his chest. His people had grown weak. They had built a life of comfort where loss was rare and peace was expected. To them, this war was unbearable. To these humans, it was familiar. "Tell me," Villar asked quietly, "why did you truly come? You owe us nothing. Your world is safe, far from the swarm. Why answer a call that others ignored?" The captain's eyes narrowed as she lifted her gaze to the smoke-filled sky. For a moment, she said nothing. Then her voice came, low and steady. "Because we remember." Villar tilted his head. "Remember what?" "Remember what it's like to be prey," she said. "Our ancestors lived on a world that tried to kill them every day. Storms that could strip the land bare. Beasts that hunted in the night. Even sickness that wiped out villages without mercy. They were prey, but they fought. They refused to vanish. That fight is still inside us. We see you now, standing where they once stood, and we cannot turn away." Her words struck him like a blade. He thought of his own people. The Threxians had forgotten what it meant to struggle. They had grown soft in their shining towers, surrounded by art and peace. And now when death came for them, they were helpless. Villar's throat tightened. "You fight like those who expect to die. But you do not fear it. Why?" The captain's scarred lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. "We fear it. Every one of us fears it. But fear does not control us. We learned long ago that fear is useless unless you turn it into fire. On Earth, if you let fear rule you, you do not live long enough to pass it on to your children. So we burn it inside us until it becomes strength." Villar could not look away. In her eyes, he saw something both terrifying and beautiful. These were not warriors born from honor or pride. They were forged from suffering. He walked with her through the human camp. He saw their wounded laughing quietly as comrades wrapped their bandages. He saw them sharpening blades that were already stained with blood. He saw one soldier sitting beside the body of a fallen friend, head bowed, whispering words in a tongue Villar could not understand. There was grief, yes, but there was no surrender. Ilaren approached, his face pale. "Commander," he whispered, "these humans are dangerous. They fight like beasts. They do not mourn as we do. They are unnatural." Villar turned to him sharply. "Unnatural? No, they are exactly what nature made them. We chose to forget the struggle that gave us life. They never forgot." That night, Villar could not sleep. He stood alone, staring at the stars. He thought of the swarm, endless and merciless. He thought of his people, fragile and broken. And then he thought of the humans, scarred, bloodied, unyielding. Perhaps this was why the galaxy called them Deathworlders. Not because their world was cruel, but because they carried that cruelty inside themselves and turned it into power. At dawn, the humans were already ready. Their ship repaired, their weapons reloaded, their soldiers standing tall despite their losses. Velar approached the captain one last time before the next march. "You are not what we asked for," he admitted. His voice was quiet but firm. "We asked for protectors. We asked for saviors. But what we received—" He paused, his heart heavy, his eyes fixed on her steady face. "What we received are monsters who fight for us instead of against us. And perhaps that is what we needed." The captain said nothing. She only adjusted her armor and nodded once, her scar catching the rising light. Velar turned away, his chest full of fear and something new, something dangerous. Hope. For the first time since the swarm began, Velar dared to believe they might survive. But he also understood this truth. Survival, when bought by Deathworlders, would never come without a cost. Velar could not sleep. The colony's night was dark and heavy, filled with the smell of ash and smoke. He stood at the edge of the camp, staring at the stars. His mind replayed the battle again and again. The screaming, the fire, the sight of the human ship diving headfirst into the swarm with no hesitation. The humans had fought like creatures born for war. They had faced the Kothar as if death itself was an old companion. Velar had watched them bleed, burn, and fall, but never retreat. Even when surrounded, they pressed forward. Even when the odds were hopeless, they refused to surrender. And in their eyes, he had seen something terrifying. Not cruelty, not madness, but a will so sharp it could cut steel. Velar felt small before it. His people had begged for help, and the galaxy had turned its back on them. Only Earth had answered. Only these Deathworlders had come. Why? Velar whispered into the night. Why fight for us when you owe us nothing? He did not expect an answer. But one came, a human voice spoke behind him. It was Captain Hayes, the commander of the Vanguard. Her face was tired, marked with ash, but her eyes still burned with that same fire. "Because no one else would," she said simply. Velar turned, struggling to find words. "You lost so many of your own. And still you do not leave. You do not break." Hayes stepped closer, her boots grinding softly against the blackened soil. "Your people called for help. That was enough. We don't abandon those who cry out. Not while we still breathe." Her words struck Velar harder than any weapon. He thought of his people, beaten and hopeless, and of these strange humans who carried themselves like warriors of old myths. They were not here for glory. They were not here for riches. They were here because someone needed them. Velar bowed his head, a gesture of respect his ancestors had reserved for only the greatest of heroes. "You are not like the others," he said quietly. "You are more." Hayes did not smile. She only looked back toward the burning horizon. "We're human," she said, "and that's enough." For the first time since the war began, Velar felt hope stir inside him. It was fragile, like a candle in the dark, but it was there, and as long as the humans stood with them, perhaps the galaxy still had a chance. The dawn came slowly, its pale light washing over the broken colony. The fires of the night before were now only glowing embers, and the silence of the battlefield was heavy. Velar stood among his people, watching the humans move with steady purpose. They had lost comrades, yet their faces showed no surrender. Their grief was deep, but it turned into strength, not weakness. Captain Hayes walked through the camp with her soldiers. Each human carried themselves with the weight of loss, but also with pride. They honored the dead, laying them side by side with care, covering them with cloth, whispering quiet words in their strange language. Velar could not understand the words, but he understood the feeling. They mourned as if every fallen warrior was family. Velar felt tears sting his eyes. His own people had nearly forgotten how to fight, how to believe. Yet these humans, strangers from a distant world, had stood in front of death itself for them. One young human, a soldier with a scar across his face, approached Velar. He carried a small device, a hollow projector. Without a word, he activated it. A shining blue image rose into the air. It was a human city, alive with lights, crowded with towers and bridges. Children played in the streets, people laughed, markets buzzed with noise. "This is Earth," the soldier said in a low, rough voice. His words were simple, but his eyes told the rest. "This is what we fight for, and now, we fight for you too." Velar's chest tightened. He stared at the vision of Earth and felt a strange warmth inside him. The humans were not fighting because they loved war. They fought because they loved life, loved the fragile, beautiful chance to live and protect others. Later that day, a council was held among the survivors. The Threxians wanted to surrender the colony and flee deeper into the stars. Their voices shook with fear. But when Captain Hayes rose to speak, the room grew silent. "You can run," she said firmly. "But the Kothar will follow. They will burn every world, every city, until nothing is left. You cannot run forever. But if you stand, if you fight, you will not stand alone. Humanity will fight beside you." Her voice was not loud, yet it carried the weight of truth. Velar looked around and saw his people listening, hope flickering in their weary eyes. They had expected another speech of empty promises. Instead, they heard a vow. Valar stood, his voice trembling but strong. "Then we will not run. Not while you are with us. Not while there is still a chance." The humans and Threxians clasped hands that day, warriors from two worlds bound by fire and blood. And as the sun set over the wounded colony, Valar knew something had changed. The galaxy had ignored their cries, but Earth had answered. The Deathworlders had come, and because of them, his people no longer felt alone. The war was not over. The enemy was not defeated. But for the first time, Valar dared to believe in victory. The human ship hung in orbit like a shadow. Valar stood on the command deck of his flagship, staring at it through the wide glass of the viewport. It was nothing like the vessels of the Threxian alliance. His ships were graceful arcs of silver, designed to inspire awe. The human ship was a dark beast, angled, heavy, its surface scarred by battles long past. It looked alive in its own way, like a predator waiting for prey. His officers whispered among themselves. Some spoke of fear, some spoke of disgust. Others quietly spoke of hope. "Commander," Ellerin muttered, his voice tense. This cannot be what we asked for. We needed an army. We needed fleets." "And they send us this?" "A single ship?" Valar did not reply. He kept watching. There was something unsettling about the silence of that human vessel. No greeting, no flourish, no declaration of strength. It simply was. At last, the docking request came. Minutes later, Valar stood in the receiving bay with a line of guards at his back. The doors opened. They came slowly, boots striking metal, their movement steady. Men and women in dark armor stepped into the bay. Their faces were hard, their eyes sharp. They carried no banners, no symbols of pride, only weapons scarred from use. Valar had seen soldiers all his life. These did not look like soldiers. They looked like survivors. At their head was a tall woman. Her hair was cut short, her face marked with a burn scar that crossed her cheek. She walked with the quiet confidence of one who had already faced death many times. When she reached Valar, she raised her hand to her chest in a sharp salute. "You called for help," she said. Her voice was calm, steady. "We came." Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight Valar could not explain. Ellerin stepped forward, his voice sharp. "One ship? This is your answer? The swarm will bring thousands, and you bring what? A handful of fighters. Do you mock us?" The human captain turned her gaze on him. There was no anger in her eyes, no offense. Only a strange, unsettling calm. She smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "You'll see," she said. Her people began unloading equipment. Not polished crates of advanced technology, but rough, scarred gear. Weapons that looked handmade, patched, rebuilt again and again. Some of the Threxian guards whispered in disgust. Others whispered in fear. Valar watched closely. The humans moved with discipline, but not the stiff, ritual discipline of the Alliance. Their discipline came from necessity, from living on the edge of survival. Every movement was efficient. Every glance was sharp. He felt a chill. Later, in the council chamber, Valar sat across from the human captain. The glow of the star outside lit the room in pale blue light. "Captain," he said slowly, "your ship is strong, but the swarm will come in numbers beyond counting. Why would your people answer our call? What could you possibly gain?" The woman leaned forward. "We didn't come for gain. We came because we know what it's like to face extinction." Her words made the chamber fall silent. She continued, her voice low but firm. "On our world, everything fights to survive. Storms tear down our homes. Predators hunt us in the dark. Disease, hunger, war, always something tries to kill us. We were not given peace. We were forced to carve it out with blood and fire. So when we heard your call, we understood. You don't need an empire to save you. You need people who refuse to die." Valar's hearts tightened. He had heard many speeches in his life, but none like this. It was not a promise of glory. It was not a vow of honor. It was survival spoken plain. Ilaran shook his head. But you are few. How can you stand against the swarm? The captain's scarred face turned toward him. We don't measure ourselves in numbers. We measure ourselves in how many times we've stood when others would fall. You want to know what we bring? We bring the will to fight until the last breath. Valar stared into her eyes, and for the first time in months something stirred inside him. Not confidence, not yet, but something smaller, something dangerous. Hope. That night, Valar walked through the human ship. It was not polished like his own. The halls were narrow, the walls marked with dents and burns. The air smelled of oil and steel. In one chamber he saw humans repairing weapons with their bare hands, laughing softly as sparks flew. In another he saw a group sitting together, sharing food from simple metal tins, speaking in low voices. These were not soldiers raised in training academies. These were people who had lived war every day. He remembered the captain's words. We bring the will to fight until the last breath. Valar felt his fear twist into something new. If these humans were truly Deathworlders, then maybe, just maybe, the swarm would find something it could not swallow. And so the first night passed. The Alliance looked at the humans with doubt, with fear, with uncertainty. But in the silence of the fleet, where shadows of the swarm still lingered, the humans prepared. They cleaned their weapons. They sharpened their blades. They spoke little, but their presence was heavy, as if they carried the weight of countless battles with them. Valar knew nothing would ever be the same, for the Alliance had called for saviors. But what had come instead were predators wearing the shape of men and women.